Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, continues now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for May 6th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is Hour 2 of 2. The goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers, using the checks and balances brilliantly put in place in our supreme law of the land, the Constitution of the United States of America. That is our guide. As you know, we reject revolution unless it's a Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Welcome to the show. We've got a great guest today, John Deaton. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's a former U.S. Marine. He's the 2024 GOP Massachusetts US Senate nominee. He's an author and a whole lot more. Welcome to the broadcast, John.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Great to be with you.
Tell me a little bit about you then. You're a Marine. You're a prosecutor. Tell me about your growing up a little bit. Just give me a little thumbnail.
Yeah, well, I wrote a book called Food Stamp Warrior. I grew up in one of the top 5 worst neighborhoods in America, in Detroit, single mother on welfare, food stamps. And it's about never giving up, fighting for the life you deserve, overcoming cancer, poverty, violence, and things like that. And I guarantee you it's a book that it's pretty raw. You know, the Democrats and the left attacked me because I didn't edit the book. And I said, life's not edited. So I'm pretty proud of it.
I love it. Why on earth would they be mad about it? Is it just too much of a truth-telling tale? Is that the problem?
Yeah, well, you know, because you think that they would welcome me, right? I grew up on welfare and food stamps, and I'm the embodiment of the American dream. I overcame all that, but because I don't subscribe to their ideologies, you know, I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, and I talk about being raped as a child by a predator for 2 years. And I included the dialogue that rapist used, and it included the N-word, and I didn't asterisk it. And they were like, oh, you know, you're a racist because you didn't asterisk it. And my response was, the child rapist didn't edit his language, so I thought the reader should know what life sometimes can be for some people growing up in those kind of environments. And so
I got a question. How come all the rappers can just throw down with impunity and you can't? What's up with that?
Yeah, listen, it's not like I'm using everyday language. It was the environment I was growing up in. And, you know, listen, that's the politically correct world we live in. You can't even tell a true story about what happened to you if it doesn't meet their false narratives. And so I took it as a badge of honor that they attacked me, to be honest with you.
Amen to that. Now, you say that it's not your common language, but it is how you grew up, and it was reality at the time, so it's historical. They want to play historical revisionism, but the rappers today use these words with impunity, and it is their common today language, and they don't seem to have any problem at all.
No, you know, listen, anyone that would read the book that I wrote would call me a racist is someone who didn't actually read the book. But listen, when I went against Elizabeth Warren, because I went to the border and I saw what was happening, and I came back and said, this is a national security crisis, she called me a racist and a xenophobe. And so that's just their ad hominem attacks that they like to give to anyone who doesn't subscribe to their far left agenda.
All right. As you wrote the book, what did you learn? Was it healing to write it, or was it just dragging the old experiences kind of through the mire? What was it, healing for you?
No, it was cathartic. I wrote it. I never shared Sam, for 40 years. I never shared that I was raped as a child. You know, my mother died never knowing about it, and I had become successful. And so it was about unexamined trauma that even if you don't view yourself as a victim and you push it down and say, I can't change it, there's nothing I could do about it, that it can sneak up on you, and that it's okay to acknowledge that bad things happen to you, and maybe it caused you to have some bad habits in life. And so it was really cathartic. And I'm very proud of it because I've had men, in their 50s and 60s tell me things that happened, and it was good for them to read it as well. I'm a Marine. I grew up in the hood. I've been in hundreds of fights. I'm supposed to be this tough guy, but I'm capable of saying, look, I got scarred, I got damaged, but I'm okay. And it was okay you don't have to hide from it, and you can acknowledge it and move on with your life. So I'm pretty proud of it, to be honest with you.
Did God play a role and end up changing your life?
I wouldn't be here. I talk about, I was a high school dropout for the first 3 months because when I say I lived in one of the worst neighborhoods, I'm not exaggerating. The first day of high school, I had a 38 shoved in my mouth. So I was a dropout like everyone else in my family. And I eventually found a principal at a tiny Catholic high school who gave me a shot, made me earn it, said he would cut the tuition in half, but, I had to maintain a GPA and play sports and be active. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the grace of God, to be honest with you.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. John Deaton, the book, Food Stamp Warrior. Check it out on Amazon and wherever great books are sold. Let's talk about being a Marine a little bit. What did you learn in the Marines? And then let's talk about being a prosecutor.
Yeah, the Marines, I would encourage anyone, you talk about in this world we live in where you have principles of DEI and all that being crammed down people's throats. The Marine Corps is the epitome of a meritocracy, and wearing that uniform, serving my country, one of the greatest honors of my life. You learn what honor, courage, and commitment is. You get to serve, and it was just a great experience. I got medically retired. I got injured, not in combat, but in training exercise. And I miss the camaraderie of my Marine brothers and sisters. And I would encourage anyone, young today to join the Corps.
How'd you go from Marine to prosecutor?
Well, I was actually in the Marine Corps. I was a judge advocate in the Marine Corps. Now, in the Marine Corps, you have to be a rifleman first. You're a Marine first. So you got to go through all the same training that infantry and everyone else does. But I was a prosecutor actually at Yuma, Arizona. I was actually fighting the cartel and drug infiltration on the Yuma crossing in Yuma, Arizona in the late 90s. And I got a meritorious service medal from the president for it. And
hold on. Who was the president then? Clinton?
Yes, it was President Clinton.
All right.
I don't usually volunteer it, but
yeah, but let me tell you the reason that I bring this up, John. Even whether we politically disagree with somebody or whether we, whatever, believe in somebody or don't like them or whatever, you got the Trump haters, the Trump lovers, and then you got me, the Trump realist, right? I don't like a lot of what Bill Clinton did. But nevertheless, he was the president of the United States. And in my opinion, to get, something like that from the president of the United States is tremendous regardless of who, right? I mean, it's the president. We got to think about it that way, don't we?
Absolutely. Someone said to me the other day, like if President Trump invited me to the White House, I was a Trump hater, would I go? And I was like, it's the president of the United States of America. Like, how do you not acknowledge the office and respect the office, even if you disagree with the individual's policies that are in the office? Of course I would accept an invitation. And so I agree with you. It's, when you have an award or you're getting acknowledged by the commander-in-chief, just because you don't agree with every policy of that commander-in-chief still makes that person the commander-in-chief, and it's an honor.
Anyway, I wanted to spend time on that because I want people to understand, hey, even if Bill Clinton invited me to the White House, and I'm telling you, I'm no fan of Bill, but I would go, and I would be respectful, and I would be decent, and I would go, and I would learn, and I would respect the office. And so to me, you got to separate those kind of two things. You got what do they say? The man, the myth, the legend. Or, you've got the person that'll never measure up to the commander in chief of the greatest army in the world and in my view, the greatest country in the world. No man, no woman can measure up to that. At the same time, there's grace there by Almighty God, and there needs to be a little bit of grace from the citizenry to say, when are we above all that, right? And I remember when, go ahead and skip the break, Liz. I remember when, back in World War II, the Germans and Americans were fighting or whatever. And on Christmas, they all laid down their arms and they basically sang Christmas carols together. And at some point, some things are above partisan politics, John.
They have to be. I think this division that we face is probably the greatest risk to our country, to the point where, like I said, you have people where you get criticized if you acknowledge any good that the person you agree with. Like if you're a Trump hater, it's okay to still acknowledge that the border being secured today is a good thing. It's a good thing for America. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with President Trump on everything else, and vice versa. If Biden had done something positive, it's okay to acknowledge that there was something positive. We got to get back to listening to each other and not just talking at each other. You know what I mean?
Yes, indeed. Now, not only did you get an incredible presidential award, which is incredible, you've already gone through cancer too, right, John?
Yeah, I had testicular cancer, and by the grace of God, I still was able to have three amazing daughters. Even though I was originally told that probably wouldn't happen, and that's of course been the blessings of my life. And so, but I'm one of the lucky ones. Listen, everything's in perspective. They caught my cancer early, and because it was caught early, the survival rate was great. And unfortunately, some people get diagnosed when it's too late and they lose their life. And so, just like everything else in life, you have to take the perspective that there's always someone else who has it worse than you, even if you're going through tough times. And if you have faith, you'll live see a better day. That's been my personal belief all my life.
And then you launched your own law firm as well. You were helping cancer patients?
Yeah, I represent people with mesothelioma. It's the asbestos cancer, lining of the lung. Unfortunately, it's an always fatal disease. It has a latency period of average of 35 years from the last exposure of asbestos until diagnosis. So I've been going up against, the biggest companies in the world, shipyards and things of that nature, people who are exposed to asbestos, plumbers, pipe fitters, insulators, brake mechanics, and boiler makers, things of like that nature.
Protecting people in the trades makes sense where he came from, but he goes from I don't want to say the lowest, but the dregs of society, sad to say, to really somebody who's made a huge difference in the world, serving his country as a veteran. Got to give him a big old shout out for that. And then deciding that he could be somebody, that he could overcome a lot of what he's experienced, write a book called Food Stamp Warrior. And now he's providing guidance on this incredible deal. Donald Trump has signed an executive order to reopen the Alcatraz prison off of San Francisco's shores. And it's made to detain and ruthless offenders and violent people and everything else. I guess it was closed in 1963 due to it falling into ill repair. Trump wants to bring it back. The White House says, hey, we're going to bring this back. Got to have this refurbished and expanded prison. It'll house inmates related to organized crime, drug trafficking, and violent gangs. It'll be a strong deterrent. First, John, what do you say? Good news, bad news?
No, I think it's Trump fulfilling his promises that on national security, public safety, tough on crime. Alcatraz, was a symbol, the symbolism of deterrence and tough on crime. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, notorious gang members and criminals of the past. And, currently, right now, we send those criminals to El Salvador. The president of El Salvador, Bukele, has a contract with the United States where, they house these people for us. And I think President Trump views Alcatraz and refurbishing it as a symbolism of law and order and deterrence. The criticism is that it's going to be expensive, to repair it. And since it's an island, you have to, transport water and fuel and human waste has to be transported off the island, and that it's expensive. But I think from President Trump's perspective, sending America's worst criminals to that place, to a maximum facility, is a symbolism of law and order and restoring public safety. And, a lot of people, my response is you can't put too high a price on public safety.
Let's talk a little bit about how far is it off the San Francisco shore? How far out of the bay is it or whatever?
I'm not exactly sure it's certainly over a mile. I think it's several miles. It's only accessed, obviously, by boat. And, the big debate is, did Clint Eastwood made a movie called Escape from Alcatraz because 3 prisoners attempted to escape. A lot of people think they're dead, didn't make it. And, there's a theory that someone did make it. But it's treacherous waters, obviously. And obviously right now, the people that are screaming the loudest about President Trump's post on Alcatraz is Nancy Pelosi, and because it's in her back door, and California.
Yeah, and the Maxine Waters crowd. I know she's south of there, but similar scenario, right?
Right, exactly. And they're already talking about humanitarian lawsuits. I mean, all President Trump did was post, and they're already talking about filing lawsuits on a humanitarian basis when there's no prisoners there yet. So it's kind of crazy to me that the hill that the left is willing to die on, sort of like with that Abrego Garcia MS-13 individual. It just seems like President Trump, sometimes I think he's serious about Alcatraz, don't get me wrong, but I also think that he sits back sometimes and says, watch me make them lose their mind. I'm about to tweet this or post this on social media, and sits back.
And what's fascinating is they should learn their lesson and step back and not trigger, but they don't, right? But
they can't help it. They can't help it. It's like he triggers some kind of involuntary reaction in them. I guess it stems from that disease called TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, and it's a condition where he'll make a post, and they'll just lose their mind. I mean, look how long they talked about him running a third term when he even never said it. He never said he was going to. Someone else said it, and he said, yeah, that'd be interesting, and smiled. And for a week, they all talked about how he's going to violate the Constitution and all this kind of stuff.
And now he basically came back and said, "Oh, I'm not looking for a third term."
Exactly.
Right. But man, they sure wasted a week spinning their wheels on it, didn't they? Or more.
They sure did. And you would think by now, what I'm most shocked about, Sam, is that they have learned nothing after this last election. Like, they've literally learned nothing. And you have the AOCs and the Jasmine Crockett's of the world, taking the leadership of the Democratic Party. And I think that's good news for the country, because I don't think they could ever get elected.
All right, that's one thing to talk about, the blogosphere and the court of public opinion, and people losing their minds and people loving it and all that. At the end of the day, though, what kind of legal ramifications? Can Trump just demand, hey, we revive this prison, bring it back, put prisoners in there all by himself? Does it require some act of Congress or some kind of legislative to get it done, or at least approving expenditures? I mean, how does this legally go down, John?
No, that's a great question. Technically, the Alcatraz is not governed by the Bureau of Prisons any longer. It is governed by the National Park Service because it's a tourist attraction that gets between 1.2 and 1.4 million visitors per year for tourism.
And they say it's like $6 million a year in revenue or something like that, right?
Absolutely. And so you'd have to get it transferred to the Bureau of Prisons to oversee it, and then because it involves appropriations, it would likely require an act of Congress. Now, the Senate and the House are both governed by the Republicans right now, and so if President Trump really, really wants this, then I'm sure he could try to push it through his Republican Senate and House.
Yeah, but if he wants to do it, he better get down on it. The next election cycle's coming.
It sure is. I pointed that out the other day to someone. I said, I know we just finished an election cycle, but a year from now, a year from today, we'll be in full midterm election season.
Yeah, and some are even starting earlier than that, so we'll see. I think what needs to happen is Congress needs to start codifying the things that President Trump is doing, because then it's not a check and balance battle. It's not do you have the authority to do this? Hey, the folks that control the funding and the folks that control, a lot of the details are already at the table, and they've already passed it, and he's signed it, and the legislative thing. We've got to get that piece done, and that's where I believe that most of Congress is derelict in their duty.
100%, and to prove your point on why you're 100% correct is when Joe Biden became president, he reversed 64 executive orders related to the southern border immediately. And look what that did. It caused 12 million, illegals to come into the country in 3.5 years. And so we need, just in case 2028, just in case a Democratic president, wins, we don't want that person to be able to just go back to the way it was and negate all of President Trump's executive orders. So I'm with you. I hope Congress gets off its butt and codifies some of these things that need codification in our laws.
Do you have any idea, and I know we haven't really heard from Trump too much on this, but there might be some legal logic to the question. Is there some kind of criteria that would say, hey, you're going to Guantanamo Bay, or you're going to Alcatraz, or what would separate someone from heading there? Is it the violent nature of their crimes? Is it the impact related to drugs, or the gang association? In other words, we got to break up the leaders of these organizations that are now, these drug cartels are like whole military operations. They're not just like, hey, redneck drug people, or some of these gangs. They're high powered and really connected with comms and all kinds of weaponry. And it's shocking what level these gangs and cartels and everything have been able to come to. Is it violence? Is it, hey, we got to take out the leaders? What do you think the discussion is, or the criteria might be?
Well, I think you're right, and I think that it's that's why they were able to invoke the 1797 Alien Enemies Act by basically designating certain gang members as invaders and terrorists. And so you've got these gang members, including MS-13, now designated a terrorist operation. And when President Trump is allowed, he can invoke national emergency powers with these designees and bypass, some of the immigration laws. And so, and you see President Trump also now admitted that he talked to the president of Mexico and offered military
support,
operations to take out some of the cartels. And so he's doing everything he can as far as proving that America is returning to a law and order country.
All right, stay there, John. John Deaton with me, ladies and gentlemen. Former Marine, former federal prosecutor, attorney at law. John wrote a book. Check it out. Food Stamp Warrior. When we get back, we'll drill into this Alcatraz thing a little bit more. I'm telling you, it's a fascinating discussion, and you got a front seat. Hang tight. I'm Sam Bushman. This is the one and only Liberty Roundtable Live.
Pursuing liberty, using the Constitution as our guide. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. Hamrit Thomason. Friedrich Merz has succeeded in his bid to become the next Chancellor of Germany. The conservative leader elected during a second vote in Parliament just hours after he suffered an historic defeat in the first round of voting. Trade expected to place high on the agenda today as President Trump meets with the new Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at the White House. Also, Mr. Trump still not giving up on the idea of Canada as America's 51st state. He says he's open to making a deal on the issue, but Carney, not so much. Saying the military needs less generals and more GIs. Defense Secretary Hegseth ordering the active duty military to cut 20% of its 4-star generals. He'd like similar cuts with the National Guard. President Trump says the administration is willing to work with immigrants who voluntarily leave the U.S.
What we thought we'd do is a self-deport, where we're going to pay each one a certain amount of money, and we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from.
He says immigrants who self-deport might have a chance to return legally eventually if they're good people and love our country. And the Trump administration wants a judge to toss out an abortion lawsuit filed by 3 GOP-led states.
The lawsuit from Idaho, Kansas, and Missouri is seeking to cut off telehealth access to the abortion medication mifepristone. Justice Department attorneys stayed the legal course charted by the Biden administration, though they didn't directly weigh in on the underlying issue of access to the drug. Rather, the government argued the states don't have the legal right or standing to sue. Greg Clugston, Washington.
Rescuers in Brenham, Texas have been searching for a 10-year-old girl. She was swept away by surging floodwaters. On Wall Street this hour, stocks are in the red. The Dow is down about 183 points. More on these stories, townhall.com.
Financing a home, especially in today's market, is one of the biggest decisions you'll make for your family. Work with a mortgage company that puts you first. I do. Work with a lender founded on biblical principles like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I do. It's Mike Gallagher for the only mortgage company I've used for almost a decade now when financing or refinancing Fellowship Home Loans. I'm friends with the owners, Mike and Brian. I even have them on my show occasionally. I know the care their team puts into every single customer. I can personally tell you that it's a smooth, stress-free process, and that's due to Fellowship's level of service and expertise that puts you in the right loan for your family and your goals. There's a reason Fellowship Home Loans is flooded with 5-star reviews. Whether purchasing a home or a cash-out refi to consolidate some higher interest debt, you can trust Fellowship Home Loans. Start the process. Make the call. 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
The Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit legal foundation committed to protecting our unalienable right to publicly acknowledge God. The Foundation for Moral Law exists to restore the knowledge of God in law and government and to acknowledge and defend the truth that man is endowed with rights not by our fellow man, but by God. The Foundation maintains a twofold focus. First, litigation within state and federal courts. Second, education, conducting seminars to teach the necessity and importance of acknowledging God in law and government. How can you help? Please make a tax-deductible contribution, allowing Foundation attorneys to continue the fight. You may also purchase various Foundation products as well at morallaw.org. Located in Montgomery, Alabama, the Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 founded by Judge Roy Moore. Please partner with us to achieve this important mission. morallaw.org.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, John Deaton, my guest, former Marine, former prosecutor, current attorney, and more, wrote a book called Food Stamp Warrior, grew up in the hood, made a great life, turned to God, has 3 beautiful daughters, just doing phenomenal. And now President Trump has signed an executive order to reopen Alcatraz, the prison. And I want to talk about the ramifications and the reality of it. Let me just tell you this, and I'm no legal expert. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a redneck, John, okay? I'm just a mere talk show host without any real education or anything else. You know, I'm not even a college graduate, so I'm just kind of redneck, you know. But let's just
True
discuss
American,
this.
my friend. True American.
True American, that's right. Me and old Ted Nugent. Speaking of Michigan. Anyway, I digress. The reason that I want to bring this up is this. You know, a lot of these things are double-edged swords, John. They really are. And so on one hand, we're applauding, hey, man, we're going to put all these criminal gang, thug, cartel leaders, violent, hostile, criminal people in, Guantanamo Bay. Or, okay, if we can't do that, we're going to put them in Alcatraz. And it sounds really good, right? But what happens if a Joe Biden decides, hey, man, John, you were thinking about J6, so you're guilty too, and, buddy, you're going to Alcatraz. What I mean is that how do we legally make sure that it's used properly and appropriately and that it doesn't become a backfire on good, honest, patriot Americans that for some reason some administrations seem to flat out hate?
I mean, that is the best question anyone could ask because, you know, elections have consequences, and we see some of the consequences from the last time Joe Biden was president. And I agree with you. And I think that what we need is, and what I'm hoping is that, you know, President Trump, I mean, the bottom line is due process in America does matter. And a lot of people get shocked, Sam, that the Supreme Court of the United States has declared that non-citizens, you know, get due process. Now, that doesn't mean full-fledged week-long trials like the Democrats want. But what I'm hoping is that President Trump implements, like, because that's where the legal debate's going to be. What constitutes due process for these illegals, for example?
Well, so let me stop you there because I did a video on this. And I'm telling you, due process for illegals isn't the same as due process for an American citizen. For example,
correct.
Who would be, if you had a jury of your peers, think about that term, jury of your peers, who would be the 12 jury of peers for a criminal, illegal, violent gang thug? Who would be the peers? Are we going to get a bunch of other illegal gang thug people up there? Or is the American citizen going to be their peer? That alone is problematic, John.
Well, no, and I agree with you. I was just pointing out some people are surprised. It doesn't mean
you're breaking up pretty good, John.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
That due process does not mean the same for you or I as an American citizen. It can be 24 hours. It can be, here you are arrested, this is what you're arrested on, and you got a hearing within 12 hours, and the government before a duly appointed officer. It could be a probate judge, or an immigration judge. It could be an immigration judge, and the process. That to me is where, because there's going to be a middle ground. But here's the other thing that people got to.
Oh, you're breaking up again. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You come back in and out, but go ahead.
Okay. How about now?
Oh, that's really good.
All right. So what I wanted to point out to the listeners is that President Obama, when you count turnaways, deported 5 million immigrants, illegals. He did not get one injunction against him. Same with George W. Bush, same with Bill Clinton. President Trump has deported 100,000 illegals and has already had 30 injunctions. imposed against him. And so I believe the Supreme Court of the United States in the next several months is going to hand a decision that is going to give us better clarity on this matter, because we can't.
And it's going to be very favorable to the Donald, though, because you can clearly see the difference. And if you have an honest judge in the mix, which is what we need to demand, we need to start impeaching some of these judges too, John.
Yeah, and I think we're also going to hopefully get from them where if you're a district judge in the tiny state of Rhode Island, the smallest state in the country, why in the world should you be allowed to enjoin the commander-in-chief on foreign policy issues? Well, you shouldn't be. And so I hope the Supreme Court's going to have a decision that says unless there is a direct connection between that district judge and that district that he or she sits, unless there's a connection, then you have no power to enjoin the President of the United States. And so I think we're going to hopefully see some of that. And I agree with you. That decision.
It reminds me of how for the longest time they had these government agencies literally making their own laws. They called them regulations, but what they would do is the Congress would give general guidance, and then they'd leave it up to the agencies to make all these rules and regs and everything. That got shot down in the courts. A day late and a dollar short, but at least the truth was told. It's along those lines, right?
Absolutely. What you're talking about is the Supreme Court finally ended the Chevron deference. It was called Chevron, where basically says Congress has to authorize. And one of the best examples of that is, the SEC under Biden Securities Exchange Commission was trying to impose ESG, climate change issues on companies, that had nothing to do with the SEC's purview and what Congress authorized the Securities Exchange Commission to do. But because that rule was in effect, it would allow these regulators, these unelected bureaucrats, to basically, dictate policy in this country, and the Supreme Court stopped that. They stopped it too late, like you did, but at least they stopped it.
Amen to that. All right, final thing. I know we were talking about this prison, Alcatraz, ladies and gentlemen. In addition to the legal issues and everything else, there's an economic and local impact discussion that needs to be had here. They say it'll create jobs for the San Francisco area, and it'll revive the area, and it will basically create a they call it a historical significance as a federal prison kind of thing. What do you think about the economics? Will this be a big boom for them?
Well, I think so. That right now the opponents are saying, we'll lose tourism, but at the same time, like I said, the Alcatraz prison does cost about 3 times what a normal Maine, prison that's inland basically costs.
Yeah, in other words, the cost is triple because of the being on the island and the remoteness and all the details, right?
Right. They have to get rid of the human waste. They have to bring, millions of gallons of water and fuel and obviously transport people back and forth and things of that nature. So, yes, food, obviously, catering. But it would lead to, obviously, those service jobs as well because of the upkeep. So it really comes down to whether or not President Trump really wants this to happen. If he does, then they have to act fast because it's going to require an act of Congress, too.
I want to ask you this because it's really important. Yes, it costs more for this kind of a prison. But, John, the security increases tremendously. These are the hardenedest criminals, the most violent, okay, we need to up the security. Isn't the cost worth that kind of security?
Sure. When you're talking about deterrence, listen, look at El Salvador. The president there is Nayib Bukele. El Salvador was the most dangerous place in the world, and now it has one of the most safest areas in the world, and it's because people are scared to be sent to that high maximum prison where a lot of the people on the left argue humanitarian rights and all that, but the streets are clean and they're safe. And so when you think of that kind of impact, that, hey, I'm not getting sent to Alcatraz, it's going to make criminals think twice.
I want to say this, too. Not only will it make criminals think twice, not only will it be much more secure, but what I think we need to do is a lot of the people who don't belong in prison, you didn't pay your taxes, so you're going to prison. No, find a way to garnish wages and stuff, but don't put people in prison. That puts them on the dole, not letting them make money, which they can do. Most drug offenses aren't really violent offenses, and most of them are minor, marijuana and other goofy things. And, we could take a lot of the people that shouldn't be in prison and save ourselves a gazillion times more than Alcatraz is going to cost, buddy.
100%. I mean, actually, Joe Biden led. He bragged about the bill that he passed that incarcerated many, especially African Americans for simple drug use. And you're 100% right. There's other ways. Let's get them paying taxes.
Amen. And the other thing I find interesting is not only did Joe Biden and Barack Obama do some of that kind of stuff, but as far as I understand, what's that lady's name that was running for president? Oh, I think it's Kamala or something like that. Anyway, Kamala, wasn't she a prosecutor, and didn't she go after everybody and their dog for these kind of minor offenses and weird things like that too?
Absolutely.
Although she got caught using the very drug she went after everybody else for or whatever, right?
Yeah, as Attorney General of the state of California, she basically imprisoned many people for simple drug use charges, and then she laughed and joked about it when she was confronted she admitted to using marijuana, and then they were like, well, what about all the people that you put in prison for marijuana? And she just sort of laughed it off.
She went into one of the cackles now, didn't she, John?
Yeah, that's true.
All right, it's also interesting to me about this, though. I think we could release a lot of prisoners. We become prison nation. That's got to stop. But maybe we can have a hardcore security maximum prison that's very secure, and maybe we can reduce the number of prisoners in America for minor offenses, put people back to work, and overall would be financially better. And here's the most important. Would be a much safer society. I have the redneck 10 commandments, John. There's only 2 of them because I can't handle 10. You know what I mean? And the 2 for me are like, don't hurt me and don't take my stuff.
And listen, I think that we need to focus on the worst of the worst. There are people in prison who shouldn't be there. We can rehabilitate them. They can pay taxes that help the economy. But let's have a absolute harsh zero tolerance for the gangbangers and the worst type of people. That's my focus.
Yeah, and the repeat offenders, too, though. To me, when you do violent repeat offending things, that's when it's like, hey, you got to get off the streets, man. You can't, leave these people around the rest of us, or, it becomes a threat to all of us. John, as you look at this prison thing, what do you think as a whole? What do you think the takeaway should be? Whether Donald Trump does this or not, what's the takeaway? What's the value here?
The takeaway is that, President Trump won not just the Electoral College, but the popular vote for a reason. I think that the left went so far left that they offended center-left folks. And people want common sense. They want safe streets. I mean, look at San Francisco. The irony of this is President Trump wants to reopen Alcatraz, which is right outside of San Francisco, which has become a cesspool of violence and drug use. You can't even walk the streets of San Francisco and be safe in one of the major cities of our country. Look at Chicago. We have to get back to law and order. And so I think that whether it happens or not, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw that the vast majority of Americans want something like that. They want to return to safety.
One of my dear friends, he's a former congressman, 2-time former congressman, Steve Stockman, lives in Texas, dear friend, and he brings up this idea that, what we need? We need Good Friday to be every Friday. And what we would do is we would have a board who would evaluate who's in prison and why, in other words, take case files, and then recommend to the president people who need to flat out be pardoned. And every Friday would be a Good Friday, Pardon Friday. What do you think, John?
I think it's a great example. Oftentimes pardons are done, like at the very end of a presidency, like we saw with Joe Biden. And a lot of times those pardons are only done to people who are politically connected. And you can usually find people who's made donations and things like that. And so regular good Americans who maybe made a mistake, who are good people who deserve a second chance, I think that's a beautiful idea.
Amen. All right, John. People get your book at Amazon and where else?
Amazon and where, major bookstores and things of that nature. And they could follow me on X, John E. Deaton 1. John E. Deaton 1 on X, and Food Stamp Warrior and Amazon.
And the book, Food Stamp Warrior on Amazon. John, thanks so much. We appreciate you and all you do, brother.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you right back. Have a great
There
one.
he goes. John doing a great job. Think about this Alcatraz thing, man. I think what we ought to do is become the leader of the free world, baby. And the way we do it is we just become a light on a hill, okay? And as a light on a hill, we just simply love people, and we're kind to people, and we trade with people, and we work with people. And the more appropriate you are in terms of your relationship with us, meaning you embrace free trade principles, you don't do governmental subsidizing or dumping of products or all these kind of manipulations. You don't play games with the free market. You let the supply and demand rule, and you let people do what they want to do. The goal of government is to create a level playing field and make sure contracts are honored. Very little, very simple things they could do. But just imagine what it could be like in America if we had, hey, you know what? You're going to go to Guantanamo Bay, or maybe you're going to go to Alcatraz, or you're going to go to prison if you're really doing violent, evil things. If you're the leader of a gang or a drug cartel, or you're harming society in a mass way, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, whatever. Hey, you're going to go to a hardcore prison. Okay, you just are. That's all there is to it. On the other hand, you know what? If you get busted with marijuana, or you didn't pay your IRS taxes, or you, whatever stupid little thing you did, you committed some little financial mishap or whatever you did, okay, those people don't belong in prison. And I know several people right now that just do not belong in prison. Right? And one of them that I know well, just the most Christian, mellow guy you'd ever known. He's not a fighter. He's like a filmmaker. He's a great, great person. His name is Ken Cromar. Miracles in God We Trust is his website. And all I'm telling you is this guy, all he did was he said, I have researched the tax code, and I don't believe I owe income tax. So he quit paying. And now he's in prison. He's lost his house. He's literally lost everything. And you look at a situation like that, the guy doesn't have a violent bone in his body. The guy's a peace-loving, kind, good American. He's got a wife that he's been married to for literally decades. He's got a bunch of children. He doesn't have any single violent or criminal act in his life at all, except for, you got to throw him in prison. And I think about that, and I just think, folks, we have got to change our ways. We have got to work on getting people out of prison, like this sheriff, Scott Jenkins. Why on earth is he going to prison? The illegal gang thug can run around. These congressmen and senators and clowns in the media are going to go back this illegal criminal MS-13 gang member or whatever other gang member he's in. Wagwa, I can't even remember all the names of these gangs. Anyway, and this guy's, they're going to go all the way overseas and make a big, huge news story out of this guy. But yet a Ken Cromar or a former Congressman Steve Stockman or this sheriff that I mentioned, Scott Jenkins, these guys are going to be in jail. Folks, something is wrong. We have got to reduce the prison population in America. And we have got to crack down on the hardcore stuff, and we've got to just chill out a little bit and, teach the principle. Don't hurt me, don't take my stuff. And I think we lead by saying, hey, the 10 Commandments are there for a reason. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not, commit adultery or do anything like unto it, is the updated version, right? Okay, there's guidelines that God gives us. And I don't think we should be shy in the public square of articulating that truth. Now, some people could say, Sam, I don't agree with you. Fine. You don't have to agree with me. Some could say, Sam, we don't want to do that, or we don't. Fine. But I'm still free to put that into the court of public opinion, that I believe if we were to turn to God and we were to, help people, how do people, if they go to prison, why do they go, and what is it going to take to help them, to keep them out? Now, you can't stop violent people that are psychopaths, that don't have any normal feelings, so they don't have any regret when they murder somebody, or et cetera, et cetera. Those people, we got to put them in Guantanamo Bay. We got to put them in somewhere. Alcatraz, I don't know, but they sure can't possibly get loose and mix with the population. But at the same time, I look at all these people that I know, I named several of them. None of them are violent. None of them have criminal histories. All of them are American citizens. And what did they do? Oh, there was a mishap financially, so to speak, supposedly, which, hey, Joe Biden and clowns get away with all day long because they're in a different class. Kind of thing. Or, man, you were there at January the 6th. You dared walk into the Capitol there. I've known people that have gone to jail for that kind of stuff. And what's it going to be like in the future? We have got to change how we deal with criminals. The first way to change to do that, because, again, I don't want to be the guy that talks about the problem, and then, of course, Sam doesn't provide any solutions, right? I'm not going to be that guy. I am a solutions on your radio guy. That's what Liberty Roundtable Live is. We ask hard questions and provide real solutions. So listen up. I think the real solution to this, when it comes to these prison things, most of the crimes that are federal crimes right now shouldn't be federal crimes at all. Go look at your Supreme Law of the Land, and it documents the things that are federal crimes. I think counterfeiting is one of them. I think crimes on the high seas is one of them. I don't even have a list in front of me, but all I'm telling you is there's very few. You can't commit treason, or if you commit treason, there's some, but they call them high crimes, right, or whatever. Okay, there's some, but most crimes are state or local, county, city, level discussions. And so the first thing you do is you get rid of all these crimes. It's almost like everything has become a federal crime these days. Bogus, false. Go back to the Supreme Law of the Land and follow the guidance. So that one of the solutions is to reduce the number of crimes we call federal crimes. What the federal needs to say is, or the general government needs to say, not my jurisdiction. Not my jurisdiction. And I really think that they need to learn that lesson. And Sheriff Richard Mack's case absolutely doubles down into that, right? Sheriff Mack's case was the general government said, hey, sheriffs, you're going to carry out the Brady Bill. And Richard Mack said, no, I'm not. Sheriff Mack said no. Well, then what happened is Bill Clinton said, I'll arrest you. And they had a showdown. But at the end of the day, the Supreme Court case says, hey, the federal government can't commandeer these people or these dollars or these assets to carry out the federal government or the general government bidding. They can't do it. Now, we need to use that Supreme Court case more. But all I'm telling you is, so we need to first, for solutions, say, let's make a bunch of these crimes not even federal crimes. And then now it's a whole lot easier to let a lot of these prisoners go. Right? What makes something a federal crime? Well, that's an ever-changing, evolving discussion. As society has gone forward and the government's become more corrupt, then you have this sliding scale where, hey, almost everything becomes a general government crime. We got to reject that because it's not true. It's not true at all. And so what we need to do is start to look at, hey, what are real prisonable offenses and for how long? And after you come out of prison, how do you get your life back as a full-fledged American citizen? Isn't that critical to discuss as well? Hey, if I get busted for, like, the IRS crime, and I haven't had any violence, and I get out and I've paid my debt to society, well, I'm still a felon, and I can never own a firearm again. See, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. He's paid his debt to society, or she, and there should be no harm, no foul. But there is. You're a felon for life. And even though your crime wasn't even of the violent nature, you could still never have a gun again. In fact, I don't even think our president can have a gun again. Can he? Could the president of the United States have a gun? I don't think so. I think he's a felon, isn't he? I'm not trying to be critical of it being a felon. I'm just making a point. See, everything's a felony now. And then they start to play games with a jury of your peers. They start to play games with, well, hey, there was 20 offenses against you, and, well, each juror had agreed with one of the 12, and so all 12 are hit. And no, you got to have all 12 agree on the same charges. They played games there too. So if we're not very careful, you're going to get everything becoming a federal crime, and the federal government being so corrupt, nobody will ever get a fair trial, and they'll have two classes of people, right? The Joe Bidens and us. And we've got to stand up and stop it, and we've got to do it now. This broadcast provides solutions on how to get that done. Thanks for being alongside for the ride. LibertyRoundtable.com is the show's site. LovingLiberty.net is the website for the incredible Loving Liberty Radio Networks. Download the iPhone or the Android app or listen online at LovingLiberty.net. God save the Republic of the United States of America.